The notification came through at 3:17 a.m., that soft blue light illuminating my face in the darkness of our bedroom, our empty bedroom. I'd fallen asleep waiting for him again. The message was from American Express, confirming Stephen's purchase. 2 business-class tickets to Rome, departing next Friday. 2 tickets. Not 1, not 3. 2. I remember how the screen blurred as tears welled up in my eyes, my thumb hovering over the notification, trembling slightly before I opened it. I didn't want to know more, but I needed to. 17 years of marriage had taught me to recognize the patterns, the signs, the quiet betrayals that happen in the shadows of what you thought was love. Stephen hadn't mentioned any trip to Rome, not over dinner 3 nights ago when he was unusually attentive. Not yesterday morning when he kissed me goodbye and said he'd be working late again. The pieces were falling together, but not gently. They crashed, hard and loud, against the walls I had carefully built to protect my reality. Every detail, his sudden mood swings, the extra cologne, the new gym routine, rushed into sharp focus like a jigsaw puzzle I had refused to solve until now. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, not new, just intensified. A pain that had been waiting silently for confirmation. The second ticket wasn't for me. It had never been for me. I sat up in our king-sized bed, the one we'd picked out together during better times, and wrapped myself in the duvet, as if it could shield me from what was coming. The house was so quiet. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Outside, a light rain had started to fall against the windows, each drop a tiny percussion instrument playing the soundtrack to my unraveling life. Rome. I whispered it to myself, tasting the bitterness of the word. It was where we'd honeymooned 17 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, Stephen returning to the scene of our beginning for what felt like our end. I wondered if he'd take her to the same little cafe in Trastevere where he'd promised to love me forever. Would they walk along the Tiber at sunset, his arm around her the way it used to be around me? I opened my laptop and logged into our joint account. The evidence was all there, in cold digital clarity. 2 tickets purchased in both their names, Stephen and Vanessa. Vanessa. His brand strategist Vanessa, who had been at our home for dinner just last month, smiling at me across my own table, while her foot probably played with my husband's under it. My hands didn't shake anymore. Something cold and clear was crystallizing inside me, replacing the hurt with something harder, something with edges. I walked to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. 45 years old. Laugh lines had deepened into something more permanent. Hair I'd stopped coloring during the pandemic, now streaked with silver. When had I started looking so tired? When had I become someone my husband could discard so easily? But there was something else in my eyes that night, a spark I hadn't seen in years. A determination. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or beg him to stay. I wasn't going to be the hysterical, discarded wife. No, I was going to be something else entirely. I pulled out my phone and took a screenshot of the ticket confirmation. Then I opened my personal email account, the one Stephen didn't know about, and forwarded it to myself. Evidence. The start of something. That night, I didn't call him to ask where he was. I didn't text to see when he'd be home. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at our kitchen island, planning. I thought about our history, playing it backwards like a movie in reverse, the gradual cooling of his affection, the business trips that grew more frequent, the way he'd stop mid-conversation when his phone buzzed, the perfume I occasionally caught on his collar. Never mind. I thought about our son Lucas, away at university, who idolized his father. How carefully Stephen had cultivated his image as the perfect dad, the successful entrepreneur, the devoted husband, all while systematically betraying everything we'd built. By the time dawn broke through the kitchen windows, bathing our granite countertops in pale gold light, I knew exactly what I was going to do. It wasn't rage driving me anymore. It was clarity. The kind that only comes when you've finally seen through all the lies you've been telling yourself. When Stephen came home that morning, apologizing for falling asleep at the office, I smiled and kissed his cheek. "You worked too hard," I said, sliding a cup of coffee toward him. He looked relieved, grateful even for my understanding. He had no idea that I had already made a phone call to my own travel agent while he was showering. No idea that I'd booked my own ticket to Rome. Seat 4C, right next to 4B, his seat, with Vanessa and 4A by the window. The game had begun, and for once I was the one writing the rules. The week before their flight was the most surreal performance of my life. Every morning I'd wake up next to Stephen, make him breakfast, kiss him goodbye, all while knowing. Each night, I'd listen to his stories about workrooms, client meetings, nodding in all the right places, while a voice inside me whispered, "Liar. Liar. Liar." On Tuesday, he told me he had to go to San Francisco for an emergency client meeting. He'd be gone until Sunday night. "It's terrible timing," he said, his face a perfect mask of regret as he packed his suitcase. "You know I hate being away this long." I sat on the edge of our bed, watching him carefully select ties, the blue silk one I'd given him last Christmas among them. "I understand," I said, handing him his travel toiletry bag. "Business is business." That night, after he left, I opened a bottle of wine and called my sister Rachel. I hadn't told anyone yet. Saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't ready for, but I needed someone to know what I was planning. "He's taking her to Rome," I said after my second glass. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Mara," Rachel finally said, "are you absolutely sure?" I laughed, but it sounded hollow, even to my own ears. "I saw the tickets, Rachel, in both their names. First-class hotel reservations at La Mirabelle, a suite. The same hotel where we stayed on our honeymoon." "That son of a," Rachel whispered. "What are you going to do, confront him?" "Better," I said, and told her my plan. "That's insane," she said when I finished, "but also kind of brilliant." "Are you sure about this?" Was I sure? No. I wasn't sure of anything anymore, not of my marriage, not of my future, not even of who I was without the identity of Stephen's wife that I'd carried for 18 years. But I was sure of one thing. I deserved the truth, all of it, and I deserved to reclaim my dignity on my own terms. "I'm sure," I told Rachel. "I need to see it with my own eyes. I need them to see me seeing it." The next day I went to the bank and withdrew $15,000 from our joint savings account. Not enough to raise red flags with Stephen, but enough for what I needed. I opened a separate account in just my name. Then I contacted a lawyer, one Stephen didn't know, from a firm across town and scheduled a consultation. Just exploring my options, I told the receptionist when she asked about the nature of my visit. That night, I stood in front of my closet, considering what to pack for Rome. What does one wear to confront a cheating husband at 35,000 feet? I selected my most expensive pieces, the designer dress he'd bought me for our anniversary, the cashmere sweater that brought out the green in my eyes. In my eyes, the shoes that made me stand taller than I felt. On Wednesday, Stephen called from San Francisco. "How's the weather there?" I asked innocently. "Cold," he said without hesitation. "Typical San Francisco winter." I pulled up the weather app on my phone. San Francisco, 52 degrees and sunny, unusually warm for February. "Sounds miserable," I said. "Stay warm. I miss you," he said, his voice softening in that way that used to make my heart skip. "This trip feels longer than usual." I bit back the words that threatened to spill out. Instead I said, "I miss you too. I'm thinking of visiting Lucas this weekend since you're away. Maybe drive up to campus and surprise him." "That's a great idea," he said, sounding relieved. "He'd love that." Another lie to add to the collection. He knew I wouldn't be able to reach him while he was supposedly in San Francisco. If I was with our son, clean alibi on both sides. Thursday night, I packed my suitcase with methodical precision. Clothes, toiletries, passport, and one item Stephen didn't know about. I had a small high-def camera disguised as a pen. Rachel had helped me order it online. "Just in case," she'd said. I stared at the camera for a long time before placing it in the bag. It wasn't just a device. It was a line in the sand. Proof that I was no longer the woman who turned away, who gave benefit of the doubt. The quiet dread that had haunted me was now sharpened into clarity. I was preparing not just to confront him, but to document the truth he'd tried so hard to bury. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Stephen and Vanessa laughing together in Rome, walking hand in hand beneath the Colosseum, making love in a hotel bed paid for with our money. Money I had helped earn during the lean years when his startup was just beginning. Money that was supposed to be for our retirement, for Lucas's wedding someday, for the future we had planned together. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. Every contribution I made, every sacrifice I'd folded into our shared life, swept aside like it never mattered. My heartbreak wasn't just personal. It was financial, spiritual, existential. I gave everything to them, I whispered to the darkness, and they discarded me like I was nothing. Friday morning dawned bright and cold. I took an Uber to the airport 3 hours before their flight was scheduled to depart. I needed to be settled in my seat before they boarded. I needed the element of surprise. As I checked in, the airline agent smiled at me. Traveling to Rome, how lovely. Yes, I said, returning her smile with one of my own. I'm meeting someone there. She had no idea how true that was. I'd never been good at chess, but Stephen was. He tried to teach me during the early years of our marriage, always emphasizing the importance of thinking several moves ahead. The beauty of the game, he'd say, eyes gleaming with that intensity. I once found so attractive, is that your opponent never sees the real attack coming until it's too late. Ironic that his own lesson would become his undoing. My preparations had begun months before I even knew about Rome. I'd sensed something was wrong, but couldn't quite name it. Call it intuition or self-preservation, but I'd started gathering information, subtle digital breadcrumbs that most would overlook. Last summer, when Stephen accidentally left his laptop open, I installed monitoring software that forwarded his emails to a secret account. Not to spy, at least that's what I told myself, but to protect our family. If my suspicions were correct, I never checked it, letting the information accumulate like silent testimony to what I wasn't ready to face. Until now, seated at gate B12, watching passengers mill about, I opened that email account for the first time. Hundreds of exchanges between Stephen and Vanessa, dating back 18 months. Hotel confirmations, late-night messages, photos I wished I could unsee, plans for their future, a future that conspicuously didn't include me. But the most damning evidence wasn't the affair itself. It was the financial trail. Stephen had been systematically moving money from our joint business account into a separate one. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers as he grew bolder. He was planning an exit strategy, cushioning his new life while leaving me financially vulnerable. What he didn't know was that I'd already spoken to our accountant Nolan 2 weeks ago. Nolan, who'd been with us since we launched our design firm from our guest room. Nolan, whose son I'd helped apply to scholarships when he thought college was out of reach. Nolan, who looked at the numbers I showed him and shook his head in disbelief. This isn't just unethical, Mara, he'd said quietly. Some of this crosses into illegal territory, especially the client billing discrepancies. Nolan had already prepared a full financial report. For my lawyer, Stephen thought I was the creative one, the people person, the one who didn't understand the business side. He'd forgotten that I had an MBA gathering dust while I raised our son and supported his rise. I checked my watch. 1 hour until boarding. I pulled out my phone and sent 3 scheduled emails, set to deliver automatically in 24 hours if I didn't cancel them. One to our company board with financial evidence, one to our son with a gentle but honest explanation, and one to Stephen's parents, who had always treated me like a daughter, expressing my regret at how things had ended. I wasn't being vindictive. I was being thorough. Next, I called Detective Vargas, an old college friend who now worked in financial crimes. Our conversation last week had been illuminating. Everything's set, she confirmed. Just send the text when you're ready and we'll move forward. Thank you, I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. I know this is unusual. 18 years of friendship merits unusual, she replied. Besides, what he's doing is textbook fraud. We would have caught it eventually. I ended the call and checked my appearance in my compact mirror. I'd visited the salon yesterday. Cut, color, style. The woman looking back at me wasn't the faded wife Stephen had been neglecting. She was polished, confident, purposeful. But beneath the smooth hair and tailored coat, there was something else, something raw and ancient, a primal stillness. This wasn't just about image, it was about intention. I had rebuilt myself molecule by molecule, every layer stitched back stronger than the last. And now I was ready to face the storm, not as a victim, but as the storm itself. I applied a fresh coat of lipstick, Chanel Rouge Allure in Pirate, a bold red I'd stopped wearing because Stephen once commented it was too much for me. My phone vibrated with a text from Rachel. Plane landed yet? Not yet, I replied. Boarding soon. I'm ready. Remember, she texted back. You're not just doing this for yourself. You're doing it for every woman who's ever been made to feel invisible. I smiled at that. Rachel, ever the feminist crusader. But she wasn't wrong. There was something larger at stake here than just my marriage. It was about reclaiming my power, my voice, my future. The gate agent announced pre-boarding. I gathered my things, taking special care with my carry-on, which contained a sealed envelope of documents. My lawyer had prepared divorce papers, financial disclosures, evidence of fraud, all ready to be served at 35,000 feet. I had also packed Stephen's favorite whiskey in a TSA-approved container. Not as a peace offering, but as part of the plan. Stephen always drank on flights. It calmed his subtle fear of flying, another secret he thought I didn't know. As I moved toward the jetway, I spotted them, Stephen and Vanessa, arriving at the gate, his hand casually resting on the small of her back, in a gesture so intimate it took my breath away. She was laughing at something he said, her head tilted up adoringly. He hadn't looked at me that way in years. They didn't see me. They were too absorbed in each other, in their secret excitement, in the romantic getaway they thought they were about to enjoy. I boarded first, found my seat in 4C and settled in. I arranged my things carefully, positioning the hidden camera pen in my jacket pocket. Then I ordered a glass of champagne from the flight attendant who was welcoming business class passengers. Celebrating something special? She asked with a professional smile. I took a sip and felt the bubbles dance on my tongue. You could say that, I replied. Today is the first day of the rest of my life. She had no idea how true that was. As I sipped my champagne, I watched the cabin door, waiting for my husband and his mistress to board, completely unaware that I was 10 steps ahead in a game they didn't even know we were playing. They boarded during the final call. I watched Stephen guide Vanessa down the aisle, his hand protectively at her waist, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle. It was the same laugh I'd heard at our dinner table when she'd complimented my risotto, now ringing with a different kind of intimacy. I took a steady breath and raised my champagne glass slightly, just enough to partially obscure my face as they approached row 4. Stephen was checking the seat numbers, smiling, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. Here we are, he said to her. You take the window. Vanessa slid into 4A, settling her designer bag beneath the seat in front of her, a bag identical to one I'd admired in a magazine, the same one Stephen had told me was ridiculously overpriced. Then Stephen stood directly beside me, preparing to take his seat. I lowered my glass. Hello, Stephen, I said calmly. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. 20 years of marriage, and I'd never seen him speechless before. Mara? He finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. What are you? How? Seat 4C. I pointed to my boarding pass. Right next to you. What a coincidence. Vanessa leaned forward, confusion clouding her face, until she saw me. Recognition dawned, followed by naked panic. She looked to Stephen, waiting for him to fix this. Somehow, you need to get off the plane, Stephen hissed at me, desperation edging into his voice. We can talk about this when I get back. This isn't the place. Please take your seat, sir, a flight attendant called from behind him. We need to prepare for departure. Stephen sat mechanically, his body rigid with tension. A thin sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead, despite the cool cabin air. Mara, he said, lowering his voice to an urgent whisper. Let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. I tilted my head slightly. It's not? Because it looks like you're taking your brand strategist to Rome on our 18th anniversary weekend to the same hotel where we spent our honeymoon, using money from our joint account. Vanessa made a small, distressed sound from her window seat. The flight attendant approached with pre-takeoff beverages. Champagne for the gentleman and the lady by the window? Yes, I answered for them. My husband and his colleague would love some champagne. We're celebrating, after all. Stephen shot me a warning look as he accepted the drink with trembling hands. The flight attendant withdrew, oblivious to the silent battle raging in row 4. What do you want? Stephen asked, his voice a combination of anger and fear. Money? Is that why you're here, to humiliate me? I laughed softly, genuinely amused by his misreading of the situation. Stephen, if I wanted money, I would have just transferred it from our accounts. The way you've been doing for the past 18 months. His face went from white to gray. What are you talking about? The offshore account, I said. The creative accounting at the firm, the missing client payments. Did you really think Nolan wouldn't notice? Eventually? He's been loyal to us for 14 years. You talked to Nolan? His whisper was barely audible over the engine starting up. I did, I confirmed, taking another sip of champagne. And Detective Vargas, and the firm's board of directors. And our lawyer. Well, my lawyer now. I reached into my bag and pulled out the sealed envelope, placing it on his lap. Happy anniversary, darling. 18 years is porcelain traditionally, but I think legal papers are more appropriate under the circumstances. Stephen stared at the envelope, not touching it. Beside him, Vanessa had gone completely still, her champagne untouched. You're bluffing, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. In response, I pulled out my phone and showed him the email queue set to deploy in 24 hours. Board members, clients, family members, all set to receive detailed documentation of his financial and personal betrayals, unless I canceled them. You see, Stephen, I said quietly, while you were planning your little getaway, I was planning too. The difference? My plan doesn't ruin just a marriage. It ruins everything, if you don't cooperate. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a ding. I carefully fastened mine, then looked at him expectantly until he did the same. What do you want? He repeated, defeat replacing anger. I leaned closer, making sure Vanessa could hear me too. I want everything I'm legally entitled to, plus compensation for damages to my professional reputation by association. I want the house, half the business interests, the legitimate ones, and full transparency about all accounts. That's ridiculous, he sputtered. That's more than any court would. We're not going to court, I interrupted smoothly. That would be messy, public, and result in potential criminal charges for you. This stays private, as long as you sign today, on this plane. The aircraft began taxiing toward the runway. Stephen gripped the armrests, his knuckles white. Flying had always made him nervous. There's a pen in the envelope, I added helpfully. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice small and frightened. Stephen, what is she saying about criminal charges? You told me the money was all legitimate. I turned to her with genuine sympathy. Vanessa, did you really think you were the only one he was lying to? Stephen fumbled with the envelope as the plane accelerated down the runway. Inside were divorce papers, financial agreements, and a letter of resignation from the company board. All prepared by my lawyer, based on evidence I'd gathered. There was no drama, no shouting, only the dead weight of truth settling between us. I watched his face change as he realized the extent of what I knew, of what I'd done. His ego, once so inflated, now folding in on itself under the pressure of consequences. As we lifted into the air, I watched 18 years of marriage sink into the reality of its ending. Stephen read through the documents, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. There's a notary in business class, I informed him. Seat 8D. I met her at check-in. She's agreed to witness your signatures during the flight. You thought of everything, he said bitterly. I learned from the best, I replied. You always told me to think 10 steps ahead. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was louder than any accusation I could voice. It wasn't rage I felt anymore. It was finality. A clean, cutting severance from the man who once held my heart. By the time we reached cruising altitude, Stephen had signed everything, with the recording pen I'd helpfully provided. The same pen that had captured every word of our conversation, every admission, every defeated sigh. When the seatbelt sign turned off, I summoned the notary. In the confined space of an airplane cabin, with nowhere to run, Stephen watched as his signature was officially witnessed and stamped. I'll take a scotch, he told the passing flight attendant when we were done. Make it a double. I gathered the papers carefully, returning them to my bag. You can keep your Rome trip, I said. Consider it a parting gift. I've booked myself on the return flight tomorrow morning. How generous, he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. But I continued as if he hadn't spoken. I wouldn't make any purchases on the company card if I were you. Those accounts have already been frozen. The color drained from Vanessa's face again. What about our hotel? The reservations? I smiled at her. I'm sure Stephen has enough cash for a more modest accommodation. Perhaps something with separate beds, now that you know the kind of man he really is. That was 1 year ago today. 1 year since Flight AZ-3471 to Rome, where I reclaimed my life at 35,000 feet. I'm sitting at a cafe in the Trastevere district, watching tourists drift toward the Piazza Santa Maria. As twilight settles over the city, Rome in February has a melancholy beauty. Bare trees, steel gray skies, buildings the color of warm stone glowing softly in the fading light. I've ordered a glass of Chianti and a small plate of pecorino, taking my time, savoring each bite. Rome feels different when you're not running from something or clinging to someone. It feels like possibility. After that flight, things moved quickly. The evidence I'd gathered left Stephen little room to contest anything. His partners bought him out of the firm for a fraction of what his shares were worth, a courtesy only extended because of their respect for me. I kept the house but sold it 6 months later. Too many ghosts, too many rooms filled with the echo of what we never truly had. Lucas didn't speak to me for 2 months after I told him everything. He'd always idolized his father, and the truth was a bitter pill to swallow. But eventually, on a rainy Sunday afternoon, he showed up at my new apartment with a bottle of wine and tears in his eyes. I read the emails, he said. Dad left his computer open when I visited. I saw everything. We cried together that night, mourning not just the end of a marriage, but the shattering of his childhood image of his father. Healing between us has been slow, but genuine. He's here in Rome with me now, though he's off exploring Testaccio with friends from his study abroad program. As for Stephen and Vanessa, their affair didn't survive the flight. She left him at Leonardo da Vinci Airport after discovering just how deep his deceptions went. He returned to a life fundamentally altered, a diminished career, a fractured family, a tarnished reputation. The last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona to work for a distant cousin's small accounting firm. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, too calculated in my revenge. Then I remember the coldness with which he'd planned to discard me, to leave me financially vulnerable while he started fresh with a younger woman. I remember the systematic lies, the gaslighting, the years of making me question my worth while he constructed an elaborate exit. No, I don't regret my actions. I regret only the years I spent dimming my light to make him shine brighter. My phone buzzes with a text from Rachel. 1 year anniversary of Operation Rome Takedown. How's the view from the other side? I smile and take a photo of my wine glass with the cobbled street behind it, sending it with the caption, "Clear and bright." The waiter refills my glass and asks if I'd like anything else. For a moment, I consider his question more philosophically than he intended. Do I want anything else? After 18 years of wanting what I thought was a perfect marriage, of wanting Stephen's approval and attention, of wanting to be enough, what do I want now? The answer comes with surprising clarity. I want this moment, this quiet joy of being completely myself, answering to no one, rebuilding a life entirely on my terms. I want mornings without anxiety, nights without second-guessing my worth. I want to wake up with purpose, not pretense. I want peace. Not the fragile kind built on silence, but the fierce, earned peace that comes after surviving a storm and choosing not to rebuild on the same foundation. I've started a consulting business, helping women navigate financial independence after divorce. It turns out my experience, painful as it was, has value for others walking the same path. There's something healing about transforming personal trauma into professional purpose. Lucas joins me as the sky darkens and the Colosseum begins to glow in the distance. He looks more like me than ever. Same determined chin, same analytical gaze. He slides into the chair across from me, cheeks flushed from the cold. "How was your day?" I ask, pushing the cheese plate toward him. "Amazing," he says, eyes bright. "I'm thinking of applying to graduate programs." We discuss his plans, the future stretching before him with all its unmarked possibilities. As we talk, I realize that my greatest victory wasn't in the careful execution of my plan, or in the financial settlement. It was in showing my son that you don't stay when you're being diminished. That you don't accept betrayal as your due. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, or in my case, book a seat right beside the truth. Later, as we walk back to our hotel, Lucas loops his arm through mine. "Mom," he says quietly, "I'm proud of you. For everything, for surviving, for thriving." I squeeze his arm gently, words momentarily beyond reach. The Rome lights reflect in puddles from an earlier rain, fragmenting into thousands of liquid stars beneath our feet. I think about the woman I was a year ago, fractured, frightened, but finding her power, and the woman I am today, whole, moving forward, author of her own story. Some people say living well is the best revenge. They're not wrong, but I've learned something more valuable. Living authentically is the greatest freedom. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you are, it means something in this story resonated with your heart. Maybe it's the quiet strength of reclaiming your dignity. Maybe it's the ache of betrayal. Or maybe it's the glimmer of hope that healing is possible. Whatever brought you here, I want to thank you for staying. Sometimes we don't get closure with a perfect bow on top. We get clarity. We get courage. This story reminds us that true strength often comes not from retaliation, but from resilience. From choosing yourself after years of being chosen last. As Carl Jung once said, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. Mara's journey isn't just about revenge, it's about rebirth. It's about turning heartbreak into purpose and pain into empowerment. She didn't just survive, she rebuilt. She created a new identity, not in reaction to betrayal, death, but in response to the truth. She was always enough. And you are too. Maybe today you're standing at the edge of something painful. Maybe you're deep in it. Or maybe you're on the other side, like Mara, finally catching your breath. Wherever you are, remember this. You are not alone. And you get to write your next chapter. If this story touched you, if it made you feel seen or stronger or understood, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you know, and who knows, maybe someone else out there needs to hear this too. Let's keep creating spaces where truth can be spoken, pain can be honored, and healing can begin. And remember, the best revenge isn't living well. The best revenge is living truthfully. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.